You know, boys and girls, love is a fickle thing.
Darling, I've got a little surprise for you. Gumdrop, I'd appreciate your honesty. Okay, open the door. Love is a fickle thing.
You didn't even wake up when I was making breakfast.
Where are we going?
To New York
What are we going to New York for?
to be in a band.
Is Mom and Dad going to play?
Yes.
What's the name of their band?
Alice Donuts.
And what do they play in the band, do you know?
I think it was we've done at least 14 to 1,800 shows, depending on how many we did when we were not on tour but kept playing.
Well, if you're in a band, you have to be, every aspect of your life has an analog in being a band. Like it's part being a family, it's part political work, there's work to be done. Everything has to go into being a band. You have to put a lot of yourself into it. Hopefully it's worth it.
Generally, I'm just having a ball. I'm having a great time playing, and I get lost in the music, and I'm always trying to throw in different drum fills or do different shit just to keep it interesting for my bandmates because we're playing, the same 50 songs.
The whole experience now is always terrific because we get to go back and visit people we haven't seen in years, and people, were warmly received. Not everywhere. Some people have no idea who the hell we are. That's fine too.
Also, it is like a family. All of the members, we're all close, and it's just a real good support system as well as a band.
This is fun. This is what they love, and no matter if there's 5 people in the crowd, they're going to put on an amazing show, and on stage they're going to have fun playing with each other and stuff too.
It was kind of funny when the band became more and more popular, and all of a sudden there were all these people at the shows that you didn't know. So it wasn't just your immediate circle of friends in the mosh pit at the front. It was all these strangers. You're like, well, who are you? We're like, what are you doing here? This is our band.
The thing I liked about Alice Donut is that they drew their own artwork. They made their own T-shirts and they made their own artwork design. It was so cool to have a band that actually was artistically creative as well as musically creative, and that was a total package with Alice Donut. Everything they did was artistic, musical, and just right in your face, punk rock cool.
They were just perfect. They have verse and chorus, old school pop music, but in a totally demented way. And that's just the music. Then the live show even takes it in more of a psychedelic and more of a punk vibe.
Great guitars, crazy lead vocalist. That's what I thought pretty much right off the bat. There's nobody like that guy.
I remember I walked out of there saying that's my favorite band in the world after seeing maybe 2 songs.
I thought, wow, the missing link between REM, which was so trendy then, and 4 out of 5 demos we got sounded like REM. The missing link between REM and the Butthole Surfers.
I guess discordant, intellectual, psychedelic art punk is the way I would, I guess, describe it.
They have me playing in this other room. I don't want to be playing these. Yeah.
It's just sort of like they're on their own trip and they were expressing themselves and they didn't really give a shit about any kind of conventions.
I lived here in '86, and half these buildings on this street weren't here. Ted lived on 9th Street, Chet lived on 7th Street forever. Sissy lived on Avenue B.
Yo, Smart, you on Candy Camera?
This?
Hasta la vista, hasta la vista.
In the 80s, the music, the #1 song would be the theme to Ghostbusters, you know, and then Huey Lewis, right? And I remember, you know, we'd be like, God, this must be like the lamest era in the history of music. Then through other people, they'd go, wait, but there's this going on, you know, and you'd hear Perubu, and there's this going on, and you'd hear Live Skull, or Sonic Youth, or Butthole Surfers, you know, and then you'd go see those bands and you'd go, wow, okay.
There was places like The Garage and Save the Robots and Tramps and Brownies and No Tell Motel.
There was like avant-garde kind of rubbing shoulders with definitely with early hip hop and just dance music and like rock.
The CB's was still an important place to play. Christ, the smell and the aesthetic of it. When you walked in there, it dripped of your roots and history. It made you feel that what you believed in and what you followed was still going on.
There was something about being, you know, on the outside of the mainstream with a bunch of other people on the outside of the mainstream who all have something that they like that nobody else likes.
And there was at times like an element of danger, like it was a shithole.
It was sketchy, but it was fun.
So I shaved it with my mother's Lady Noroko. It was so smooth. Like a what? Like a piglet. As smooth as a piglet.
Dave and Tomas and Ted and I were all at Columbia University about the same time.
So I came to Columbia in 1981. Tom was a year ahead of us, and he went away to live in Mahomet, Illinois, and said he wrote a novel when he was out there and they didn't like it and burned it. But he sent us some lyrics and said, you guys should put music to this. And Ted wrote the music to it, and it was American Lips, which then we started doing it when Tom came back.
So that band started just like hanging out on a Friday night, drinking some beers, whatever, and playing some songs.
And then it, I guess, evolved into more of a band, and that's when we named it the Sea Beasts.
I would be booking bands like Soul Asylum and Husker Du and stick them on stage opening for them. And people would kind of turn their noses up because they did a lot of really humorous stuff. You know, serious careerist musicians in New York kind of looked down on a band that had a sense of humor. I managed a lot of those serious careerist bands that looked down on them.
The CBs was a 4-track, a whole bunch of people, and a bunch of songs that were played, and then a party. Alice Donut was, I guess, who was left after graduation.
So that was with Ted and Tom.
We had graduated and people had left, and us three were still around.
The other guitar player was a friend of ours, Tom Meltzer.
Honest to God, I don't know why they asked me.
Tom Meltzer was in Five Chinese Brothers, which was one of the most successful country rock bands in New York at the time.
Maybe they brought me in just, you know, it was just sort of this like a crazy thing, you know, like let's get the guy who is inappropriate for this.
Now, Tom Meltzer, performance artist. Hi, I'm Tom Meltzer, performance artist.
And once that happened, they said, okay, well, we need a real drummer.
And I saw an ad that said, rock band needs drummer, we have gigs. I'm like, that sounds promising. So I went and did an audition.
Went through a bunch of drummers and got down to 2 who we liked. One guy who I think had a military background, but who could really, you know, pound the shit out of the drums. And Steve, who just looked like Animal from the Muppets, you know, he was just like so big and hairy and, you know, and he brought a bag of weed.
In the auditions, I was like, I mean, I like this music. I was listening to like bands like Husker Du and stuff like that. And I think, well, this sounds like I'll just play like I'm in Husker Du. So I'm doing that and they loved my drumming and it was like, oh, okay, we'll take him, you know.
And he just seemed so old to us at the time. I think he was like 32.
He was phenomenal. I mean, it was like no question. As soon as we played with him, we knew he had to be the drummer in the band.
Yeah, so we started rehearsing. We started initially with, you you know, Demonologist and American Lips and a few of the other old Sea Beast songs.
Alice Donut was a great band from like day one.
Got our first gig at CBGB's. We had, you know, until Friday night to give him the name of the band so he could put the ad in the local weeklies. And we were just coming up with lists and lists of different names, none of which we could agree upon. Somebody commented on how many donut shops there were on 6th Avenue or something. And I had just seen the movie Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
We changed Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore to Alice Donut Liver Henry Moore. We'll get a body part and famous sculptor in there.
And so that went down as one of the, you know, 15, 20 names that we had. And we're like, okay, we can't decide. Everybody, you know, pick 5 names and rank them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll then tabulate whichever one averaged the highest, that'll be the name. It was Alice Donut Liver Henry Moore. Ted calls Hilly and says, okay, the name of the band is Alice Donut Liver Henry Moore.
And CB's was like, that's too long. Well, you know, it doesn't fit in the ad. It's Alice Donut.
Thanks, Hilly. No, it's cool. It worked out because it's still, I mean, band names for the most part are pretty dumb, I think. And we're no exception.
You know, at first, you know, we would be in the shit slot, and they would be putting like 6 bands on a night. This was already sort of the beginning of the end of CBGB, I think.
And it was packed because of our friends from Sea Beasts and stuff. So they were like, well, we have a lot of people, we'll give them a better night next time they come.
And then later, as we were drawing, and I think Hilly liked the band, we started getting better bills so that we played with Living Color at least a couple of times. They would headline and we would be second on the bill.
So yeah, you know how it is, any band starting out, whatever gig you can get, you just take.
They have a tape back there. It's very cheap. Very, very cheap.
The Dork Me Bangladesh cassette thing was a sound check that we recorded.
Yes, that was called Dork Me Bangladesh.
Hi, I'd like to tell a story about something that happened to me. I was sitting home just the other day watching some TV when there was a knock on my door, and I went to the door to see who it was, and it was a woman with no eyes, and she had a stack full of comic books. And she gave me one of them, and she said, "Take it and read." And I took it, and I did read. And the story was so moving and compelling that I had to write a song about it.
What I wrote was the piece at the end. You know, Lisa's father was forgiven his sins. Like, I'd just written that. I went home with the guitar and just, you know, this thing came out, it was a minute and a half. And the Donuts had been asking me to do some writing, and I hadn't really been contributing that much creatively to the band, I don't think.
Every morning, as soon as Lisa's mother was whacked out on JD, he'd go up into Lisa's bedroom and he'd start wailing away on this poor little kid. Making that sound going, oh, waka, 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 baby, 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 have me a good time, yeah, yeah.
And they were very enthusiastic, said, oh, we got to do this. And you've got to tell the story at the beginning. We'll make noise, and you just tell the story, and, you know, Tomas will play a character, and that's it. It was never the same way twice.
How you doing? How's the weather?
The weather's fine.
Hey, how about
what
them
you've been
Mets?
doing with Lisa. But you gotta let me do it too if you want me to turn you in.
And then I said, whoa, I'm in the soup now. What am I gonna do? I gotta let him do it to Lisa, or he'll turn me into the police.
I saw that footage for the first time in 20-some years and immediately realized that I will never be president of the United States. Even without the video, the song probably would have taken care of that.
Ted took that recording, and I think maybe some things from the 4-track demo, I can't remember what was on it, and sent it around to a bunch of radio stations around the country.
Alice Donut here in the studios of KUSF as our guest DJs coming in today for the 3-day shows you guys are doing. You went across the country just to come here.
We did.
Yeah. Coast to coast.
Took almost all day.
I'm excited for tomorrow night.
We are too.
Is anybody else excited? Did they win tickets?
Not yet.
What was the question again?
The question was, who was the first person to play any Alice Donut on the air? And it was Germ, right here at KUSF.
Our Germ? Our very own
Your
Germ?
Germ.
Shut up.
Yes. And that's why
how
we
you guys got signed, huh?
Exactly.
And from that day on, the both of them were doing it to poor little Lisa.
Named Jim Smith, but I'm Germ on KUSF. I did the demo tape show for probably about 16 years, something like that. And they sent me a demo a long time ago.
Your daughter has a venereal disease. And that mother, she put two and two together mighty fast, I'll tell you. And she got more. She knew it was going up.
It stood out. I liked it a lot, especially the Wacka Wacka song.
And she said,
You repulsive little shit, I hate you, I hate you.
and Lisa's father said, whoa, whoa, I'm in the soup now. She knows when I'm at the Lisa.
I first heard of Alice Donut when Klaus Fluoride, Dead Kennedy's old bass player, said, I got something you have to hear. And it was a recording of Waka Baby that he had taped off of an all-demo show on KUSF, and the DJ's name was Germ. And I knew right off the bat this was one odd band.
He ran home and he said, hey, Lisa's mother, listen to this. And she said,
I hate you, repulsive
he
little
said, whoa, shut up, you old cow. Listen to this, dry up and pray.
And then the kicker was it was acting out a Chick Publications, little religious tract or comic book. And Klaus knew I was fascinated by the sheer dementia of Jack T. Chick. And this one had to do with child molesting.
We're never gonna hurt you. Never gonna hurt you anymore. And Lisa says, oh, really? Lisa's mother was forgiven his sins, cause he laid his savior in. Lisa's mother was forgiven his sins, cause he laid his savior in. Hey, waka, 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 baby, baby, baby.
So I really liked the song. I thought I've got to find out more about this band. It's a little poppier than I normally like, a little more indie rock, but this is really good and really twisted.
Oh, really?
Biafra loved it, and he contacted us via a postcard, which was like a 3D postcard of Jesus suspended over a waterfall, and he drew in some little turds.
And asked if we had a gig and wanted to come see the band. So we said, yes, of course, we have a gig. And we didn't have a gig,
Two of the donuts were living in a loft.
So we just kind of emptied out the loft and turned it into a club with a PA system and a stage and lights.
He's invited 100 of our closest friends, keg or two of beer, and we made our own gig.
So Biafra came up to the loft and sort of knew immediately it wasn't a valid club, but didn't give a shit.
We played, shredded, and he stayed, talked, and talked, and talked.
So we began talking, and eventually first album wound up on Alternative Tentacles, and a great consummation of a great marriage began.
Which is why it's pretty ironic that the song that broke them was Tom Meltzer's song, because he was already talking to Ted about maybe not being able to do both bands.
Well, I left the band when they signed with Alternative Tentacles. What happened was they got signed, which I never expected to happen, or I expected, well, my other band's going to get signed, which hadn't happened either. And when they got signed, they came to me and said, okay, well, we've been cool with you being in this other band, but now we're going to make a record and we're going to go out on tour. You're not really going to have time to be in this other band. And I was the lead singer and the primary songwriter in the other band. I really felt like, there were some opportunities there for us. So I had to pick, and it wasn't really a hard choice for me. I really enjoyed being in Alice Donut, but it wasn't, it was a way to blow off steam. It was sort of a good, for me, it was a side project kind of thing.
And then again, we just put an ad in the paper for a guitar player, and that's how we met Michael.
I auditioned the next week, and the next week played at CBGB's.
He came in, there was kind of no question, he was perfect.
Steven likes to say that the band started in February of '87, and I like to say the band started in September of '87. So, when I joined.
There's lots of things in a human head that I hope I never have to touch. She likes the taste of burning flesh. Cannibals eat their love. I'm a sucker for romantic stuff. Jonah.
Donut Comes Alive, we went to Water Music in Hoboken. And I'd never recorded in a big studio. I'd only seen a 4-track.
The loft was always hard to find for me. I always got lost when I went up there. But that's where the album cover was painted up on the roof of that loft there. Yeah, that's the album cover, first album. That Alice Donut thing written on the wall there was up on that roof.
Yeah, I first became aware of Alice Donut, oddly enough, when I became music director of the local college radio station WXYC here in Chapel Hill back in the summer of '88. You know, as music director, you had access to CMJ magazine, College Media Journal, and had the charts. And here's this band I've never heard of on the chart. Other stations are playing this. It's actually on the chart because I feel like it did really well in the college radio chart. I feel like it was like a top 10 record or something. It was like, I remember, you know, like I knew every single band except for this one. I gotta find out who this band is, you know. I remember liking the songs and his voice, and I thought it was distinctive. So I kind of felt like they had that kind of punkish attitude with pop songs, but with a sense of humor to it as well, you know. And I felt like when I heard that record, it kind of fell into those lines of, I guess for lack of a better word, the punk pop bands that I had grew up on, you know, being the Dickies, the Buzzcocks, 999, some of these bands, and I kind of felt like it was an extension of that.
So as soon as that was done and released, we went, you know, across the states.
Yeah, Ted was just, he booked it all. He was managing the band back then. Yeah, he just started calling clubs and booking shows. And it was horrible, man. It was miserable. I mean, the individual shows, you would have an amazing time. And it was great, you know, get out of the city, drive around in a van with your buddies and get wasted every night and all that. But, you know, you drive 15 hours and walk into the club and they look at you like, who are you? You're like, we're the band. Like, we hired a band?
I remember because we didn't know what to expect. We didn't know whether there were going to be like 1,000 people or nobody. And it was much closer to nobody.
For all the initial years of the band, Ted was doing the bulk of the management for the band. He was really the one who would be pushing to get the band out there. But as we were starting to get a bigger following and, you know, there was a lot of work to do, I guess at that point, Ron Berman came on to help manage the band as well.
They pack her away to an asylum. It's just a little asylum for detoxification.
I used to book a venue in a club in Tallahassee, Florida, where I was the concert booker for Florida State University. And the woman at Bulging Eye, Michelle, had a really cool roster, and I ended up promoting every band that she was a booking agent for. And it was, you know, it was a great roster. It was like Alice Donut, the Doughboys, the Afghan Wigs, the Fluid, the Buck Pets, the Pedal Jets, the Flaming Lips, of course, the biggest one. No, actually she had Mudhoney and later even Nirvana. So I knew it was always going to be like kind of quality, cool, interesting stuff. And that was back when there really was like an independent label scene. And so you kind of knew that if it was like an alternative Tentacles band or a sub pop band or a touch and go band or whatever these labels were, Discord or Merkin or whoever it was, that you kind of could expect a certain type of music and a certain type of ethic, I guess, you know, or vibe. And so you were rarely disappointed. And then when I moved to New York, they were the only people I knew, and you know, we kind of grew the relationship.
he was helping us, booking shows now and again, and it was like a natural progression, for him to become our manager.
Repeat after me. Egg. Egg. Womb. Egg. You didn't expect that, did you?
Something has come between us. Something has come between. Something has come between us. Something has come. Something has come.
Each time you go touring, you just have to keep going because maybe a third people are actually going to see you. And then the next time maybe it'll be a little bit more than that. And then it just keeps building.
We rented this crapped out old van and took off. And first gigs were great.
We never did the thing where we were like a supporting band. We were always the headlining band. So it was obviously smaller venues with very few people. But it was always a lot of fun. I mean, there was always, little catastrophes and things like that. But we all, for the most part, got along really tremendously, and which makes the biggest difference because you can't hang out for, 900 hours a week with people that you can't stand.
Well, we started building little markets in different places like Philly and
DC, Baltimore.
We can go to Iowa City.
Florida was big for us, and Michigan. San Francisco was always great for us.
Steve and I split most of the driving, and Steve was a New York City cab driver and is very particular about who should be driving and how they should be driving, so Steve wound up doing the majority of the driving.
Favorite tours are the tours where the van doesn't explode, which was most of them, fortunately.
The bane of every band's existence, any struggling new band, is the van, because vans, they break down all the time. And we are the most mechanically inept group of people you've ever met in your life. And we'd always joke, it was like we were like cavemen, because the van was our world and we lived in a world we didn't understand, but we were completely reliant on the vagaries to decide if we were going to eat or not.
Another question then for the pair of tickets for Saturday night with Alice Donut.
We'll give you two questions. Who's the cover boy on our albums, or if you can identify your own name and address, we'll give you the tickets.
Well, Chet is one of our oldest friends. Tom and Ted and I went to college with Chet at Columbia. Was very rabid about music and just one of the funnest guys to hang out with.
Yeah, he's like an all-around amazing guy.
He was like the black hole of the East Village. You couldn't be near Chet without like being drawn to his apartment on 7th Street, and people would hang out there all the time, even when there was no room, because there's no room in there. It was all books and records.
Tom had decided, I guess, that he wanted to take me along on the road with them, even though I wasn't in the band.
When we first started going on tour, we asked Chet to come along with us as road manager, even though he couldn't drive and was not really good with money.
I went along with them on their first tour and a couple more, but eventually they got a more professional road manager.
You know, we love Chet, and he was, you know, fun to have with us in the van.
He's like a weirdness magnet. He knows where something interesting is going on. And he can just show up into a town, and we'd play a show, and he'd go, hey, we got to go to this party, and you know you have to go to that party because there's something going to happen.
Perhaps I am the weirdness. Maybe I'm just... I spent some years in Buffalo. I couldn't find much going on.
And he's a, you know, amateur cross-dressing masochist.
It wasn't because I had some fetish. It was because Tom wanted to involve me in some of their films and record covers and suggested that I do it. And then it sort of became a shtick.
There were so many shows that involved Chet and garter belts and whipped cream.
And there was the tour where he was opening for us, doing a spoken word monologue as a suicide addict.
And they had this big-ass empty concrete basketball court, and I sat down on it and doused myself with gas, lit a match, and hosted the best damn barbecue those vets had ever seen.
The first time that Tom talked me into cross-dressing, which really isn't cross-dressing, it's just me putting on a dress, was for the Mrs. Hayes video. I play the two people involved in an unhappy marriage, one of whom rapes and kills the other, I think. No, one of them rapes, and there's a rape and a murder in it. I don't really remember the events, but I had to do it all to myself. And that was that became the photo for Mule.
I had a job at the time and I couldn't do long tours. I was at the Coalition for the Homeless, and that's when we pulled Richard in to take my place on the road.
A friend of mine who had moved to New York, he called me up one day while I was in Boston. He was in New York and said, hey, I saw this ad in the Village Voice that said, you know, garage punk band, noise band looking for guitarist, influences Alice Donut. So I called the number, and it was Mike Jung, actually, and after a few minutes I said, so, is it Alice Donut? I remember he kind of paused. I think he was like toying with me a little bit. And he's like, yeah, it's Alice Donut. And I was like, yes! Because I mean, it was like, I needed this, you know, I'm scooping ice cream, and I'd rather be in Alice Donut. Yeah, it was like perfect. I was 21 and it was like just perfect. I basically, you know, they wanted somebody who could tour in lieu of Dave.
Yeah, he was more than 70. He was in the band too. The band had 3 guitar players, and we actually did a couple of shows with all 3 of us playing. It was terrible. It didn't work well at all. But we recorded, you know, two of the records with all 3 of us, and that was great, you know, because Richard adds an entirely different thing to it than either Michael or myself. And he was a great songwriter and singer, guitar player, so it was great having Richard in the band too. But for a live act, you know, it's 2 guitars, bass, and drums is what we are.
First thing, I played a couple warm-up local shows, and then right in the fall of 1990 went to Europe. I mean, it was the coolest thing in the world for me. It was like the first time I'd ever been in a real band that did much. And it was like first time on tour, first time in Europe. It was a mind-blowing experience.
How did you cross over that water frontier today?
The water frontier, most people go from Hungary straight to Yugoslavia. We went the long way through Austria. Then we found the smallest road possible. We went up to these mountains, you know, going like 5 miles an hour, you know, 10 kilometers an hour, through fog and stuff up and down the hill, and then finally got here, you know, just because we're bad with maps.
It's different. I mean, you're in Europe and you have to learn, you have to deal with people who don't speak your language, and they drink different beers and different money, and getting through borders and things like that.
For us, also, we had already started, it was already our third album, so it was a bit easier. You know, we had stuff out and people knew about us.
And Richard got sick like halfway through the tour.
Like I had this cold that just wouldn't quit. So it just was a bit miserable.
And then they called me, and then I had to take leave from work and then fly over and finish the tour.
Alice Donut were huge in Europe. I mean, like, you know, huge in that we could go there and play pretty much anywhere and have 1,000 people. You know, I'd say, like, you know, for many years. It happened pretty quickly. They put a lot of time into it.
When you're big somewhere in Europe, you know, that's like a whole country you're big in. So, like in Holland, we did really well. In Germany, we did really well.
Loved it. I was so happy I went. Touring Europe is so much better than touring the US.
Crowds were bigger. Europe was always really great. The people were really, you know, into music, into the music, and really supportive. And
it's really tough anywhere in the US to get people to come out to see music they don't already know. We're a very non-experimental kind of population here, and you know, don't want to take any chances. In Europe, it's much easier to find crowds that will just go out to see something new. And granted, you know, your band coming from New York, coming from the United States, so that itself had a cachet that would get people to want to come out. But they would also want to hear the new music. They wouldn't want to just hear, you know, stuff from your old records. They'd want to hear the new stuff too, and you don't find that as much here.
it was really nice how, like, you know, most of these venues are kind of government subsidized, whatever. There's like food and beers and all this hospitality and PAs and places to sleep and food and drinks and places to sleep and food and drinks. Shorter drives, food, drinks, places to sleep.
The drives are shorter because there's more cities closer together.
Yeah, the average drive in Europe you think is like going to be 3 or 4 hours a day. In the States it's like, you know, 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day.
People-wise, it's remarkably similar. You meet cool people anywhere. People look remarkably similar. They're wearing kind of like the same clothes in Poland that they are in Seattle. We kept touring as much, from the get-go we would have just kept going. But in the early days, we would lose money. I guess after Mule, we started making money. It just seemed, okay, now we're making money, we can go on tour, and then we don't have to work. We have like a little bit of time to write the next album. Jackets came about kind of by accident. We move a lot when we're playing, and you'd be sopping wet with clothes. And even in the early days, we'd play several nights in a row, and we weren't touring, but we'd do like 4 shows in a row. And you don't have that much clothes, so all your clothes are wet all the time. And that was, so I'm thinking I gotta get something going. And then I tried, you know, a trench coat once, and I was like, well, this is cool. There were a lot of different kinds of coats. But this coat, one, I'd be less hot, and the stuff wouldn't stick to me. And then I didn't have to think of ever what I would have to wear. And I could wear the same thing or just get 2 coats and not have to do any laundry if we were touring. You have one wet piece of clothing, and then you're dry. The rest of your clothes is dry. The jackets, they take a lot of abuse, so like sometimes they're just like too skanky. I didn't know where like half the jackets went. What's funny is like when we're on tour, people generally would bring things back. I lose everything. I'm always forgetting stuff. So I bring very little and come back with less. Lots of jackets just ended up in like the tour van, ended up at somebody's house that I just forgot. But I heard that like somebody sold a jacket on eBay. I don't know how much it went for. I should have bid on it. jacked up the price. You know, every 2 tours or every tour I make a new one. To spice up the coats, I just started drawing on them. I've been drawing the same way since I was 12. It really hasn't changed so much. So the characters I draw are just people, you know, usually chubby and, you know, a little bit warty, a little bit gnarly looking, with extended eyes and big noses, and generally happy people who are kind of ugly. Happy, ugly people. turning REM on its head, you know.
By the time of Revenge Fantasies of the Impotent, they were pretty well just recording things and handing them to us, and the trust was there. You know, as they graduated from school or left and were more being ground up in the workaday world, the lyrics got less surreal and darker with each passing album.
We wrote the album because of the war. The Gulf War was coming, so we wrote that. It was like the fastest album we wrote.
We wrote that in 14 hours.
We wrote that really quickly, wrote and recorded really quickly. We're pissed off about, you know.
It was obvious this thing was going to happen, and there's nothing you can do to stop it, realistically. Even though the whole album was egged on because the war was going on, the whole idea of revenge fantasies, the revenge fantasies of like powerless people or people who talk shit, you know, like a drunk at a bar who's like, I'll show them.
Because as the band was developing, we were spending a lot more time together with all of the touring we were doing. You know, different ideas about what the band should be doing, different, you know, personality tensions arose. So we had a band meeting about these tensions, and everyone's tempers just kind of exploded in that meeting. A lot of pent-up stuff over the years. I got really pissed off because I didn't like the way that it all unfolded and the way, you know, that old friends were treating each other. So I quit the band.
Well, I grew up in Austria in a little small town called Klagenfurt, which is off the border of Italy and Slovenia. There's a big lake there. In the summer you go swimming. In the winter it freezes over and the whole city is on ice skates. I had very kind of sheltered middle class upbringing, although I came from a military family. And when I was about 12, I started taking guitar lesson. Well, I studied classical music in Vienna at the Academy for Music and Art. For 4 years I graduated. My majors were guitar and conducting, but also was in punk rock bands in Vienna at the same time. So how I ended up in New York was I came over in 1990 the first time to New York with some friends for about 2 weeks. We went to see a lot of shows. One of them was Alice Donut at the Pyramid Club. And I remember I was just blown away because it was just so intense and they were all really great musicians. I remember, the singer coming out and he would stage dive and the whole audience just split and it was like, bam, right on the ground. I was like, whoa, he's nuts. So I finished my studies. I graduated in February of 1991. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do after, if I should keep going. I was kind of floating around, but I knew I wanted to go back to New York and check out the music scene, because at this point, especially East Village, was just musicians, and there's all this rehearsing studios, all these bands, there's a lot of stuff going on. So I went back. In the Village Voice, I saw an ad that Alice Donut was looking for a bass player. And I just went in and did my thing, and then they actually ended up calling me back, I was kind of surprised because I thought I'd just try and see. They're probably not going to take me anywhere.
We have a sticker up in the phone booth where we call her from on the East Village. It's like, do you want to be in our band?
And then actually everything went really fast. The first thing we did a video for Big Ass. And then we started touring pretty much. So I had to learn the rest of there was another 3 albums that I had to learn. So we rehearsed and we also started recording pretty much soon. And then we went touring and we came back the day before my visa ran out. And I went back the day my visa ran out. And I just went back and sold everything and came back, to tour with Alice Donut.
Generally, an album, because all the songs are written around the same period of time, they all have like a few ideas that kind of hold them together. Untidy Suicides definitely did. At some point we had a meeting and we said, okay, these suicides happen in this album and here are some stories that all relate to each other. It's like one big song. So that was like a unified concept. What I like about Ex-Postal Worker, the whole phrase going postal came like a few years later. Or even the word disgruntled ex-postal worker. It's a cliche now, but when I wrote it, it wasn't. I'm happy with those words. I'm happy with that story. The title's kind of long.
Reading 1993.
I mean, that was, if you want to pick a sort of a pinnacle, that might be a Reading Festival. I mean, I don't know how much bigger things get.
Fishbone, the Lemonheads,
Porno for Pyros,
Primus and the Breeders, and
Bolt Lavolta, the Goats,
Babes in Toyland,
Jesus Lizard,
Dinosaur Jr.,
Mercury Rev,
New Order.
Every band that was on the bill was bigger than us.
We were probably the only van that didn't have a tour bus. We were still in a little van.
I was almost like, what's going on here? Somebody's made a mistake. How did we get on this bill?
Primus is really pissed off at us because they played before us. But Jesus Lizard played before them.
We played on the main stage, and when I walked on the main stage and looked out, and there were 40,000 people, or whatever it was, people as far as I could see, and Alice Donut's on this huge stage, and Chet was with us.
So usually when you're on stage, you have all the lights on you, you really don't see the crowd too much. But since this was a day show, you could see every face in the audience.
Obviously, playing to 40,000 people is unusual, when you're used to the clubs and 800 people at most, or 1,000 people at most, and sometimes 40. Playing to a big crowd is easy. Playing to 10 people is hard.
We partied a lot that day. I think I was at the most rocking party I've ever been at in my life, with Elvis Costello and other people, but I don't remember a second of it.
I heard some really bad news that there will be no trombone playing.
Yeah, I know it's bad news.
You're breaking my heart.
My bicycle threw me off about a week and a half ago. I landed on my nose and my lip, and I was somewhat damaged, so I don't want to mess with it. So I can't play the trombone tomorrow.
Fucking Moses!
One of the magic things about Donut is we all come from completely different musical backgrounds. Sissy's classical guitar gig thing and Michael's classical piano thing. And I'm some kind of jazz thing or something, and Tom is playing washboard in some band. And
so the trombone is there at the gig?
I played the trombone as a little kid, and then I put it down for a few years. We wanted to do, some cover, and I said, I got a trombone, we could do an instrumental thing or something like that. We figured out we would do War Pigs.
I think When the Saints Come Marching In.
Ring of Fire.
We did Helter Skelter. And
Where's My Mind?
We did Waiting Room once, whatever.
Waiting Room, thank you.
Oh, he always brought it to the studio and did overdubs for stuff.
And it was always kind of a good way to break up the set live because, we do we throw it in the middle, do half a set. It would give Tom a break.
He's got a lot of personality, so he had no problem getting up front.
It just became a real part of the Donut set was get me out of the drums, get the trombone going on. Freaking freely, the kids love it, that most of them had never seen a trombone before except for in a marching band. And whoever watches marching bands, come on.
Well, okay, I might as well say that the first time I saw them, they contacted me and said, look, we're doing 2 nights at CBGB's. I went down, and so that was my first impression. There was a lot of energy, a lot of rhythmic drive, much more than you found a lot of indie rock at the time. And I was really impressed by Tom's persona. I usually find it a really good sign with the band if I'm a little flipped out by the front person. Tom was a little who is this guy? And it seemed like a little nuts, and he had the thing, and he had a certain kind of command, and I was like, well, yeah, okay, well, that's a band and an audience is one thing. How's that going to work with me? It actually worked out fine. I was glad that he was one of those people. It's like, oh yeah, and then I met him. He was really nice.
When we did Dry Humping the Cash Cow, which was our only live album, we kind of had the idea that we wanted to do something different.
We recorded like 3 days at CBGB's, one day of which the engineer didn't press record.
2 of the tapes just didn't record at all, so we were kind of stuck with missing a whole bunch of music.
Some of them we had to redo, the ones that were good on the night that wasn't recorded. We redid in Martin's studio. So there were some actual crowd sounds on there. Not all.
I wasn't around when they discussed what to do about the fact that a lot of the songs were lost. I guess that the natural thing to do would be to add crowd sounds.
This next one is the second song on the first side of our third album. It just came out 4 years ago, and the song is called Mrs. Hayes.
Okay, we're not fooling anybody here, so you know, if it's gonna be a concept record, well, it should just be just like no doubt that we're not kidding it.
Well, we brought in Frampton Comes Alive, Kiss Alive, 1, 2, and 3. And
how about taking stuff from Live at Budokan? Another fake record anyway.
You know, we tried to be as cheesy about it as possible. I mean, with like Budokan screams, it's pretty obvious.
When we started, all the bands we loved were on indie labels, Meat Puppets and Minutemen, Husker Du, and things like that. So getting on AT and being able to do that, that was success for us. You know, being able to like make a living, making our songs, doing our thing.
In the mid-90s, when the whole grunge scene started to explode and the Seattle scene started to explode, all the major labels were like trying to swipe up any band that they felt like, you know, could sell and would be like a part of this scene that had credibility, because, you know, they wanted credibility.
When I worked for big labels in the 90s, I mean, it was kind of like a feeding frenzy, and indie cred was something you looked for in a band that A&R people were looking for. Whether you were for Caroline Records, you were for Sony, selling those first 5,000 to 10,000 records were really tough. Labels learned in the 90s that, oh, if you can find that band that's already sold those 5,000, 10,000, we add our muscle, we'll turn that 10,000 into 100,000.
It was really an exciting time, you know, because we got wined and dined a few times, but it was also a very depressing time for me, because a lot of these guys were just full of shit, and they actually didn't even care about the band.
The big labels were just trying to sign, really what, you know, looking for, at this point, the next Nirvana.
There was nothing really dangerous about Nirvana, you know, and I love Nirvana, that's not a slight, but there was something wrong and off about Alice Donut.
We're an unconventional, cool, underground band, and that's what we are. So being something else wouldn't have made sense.
At that time, there was angst, a lot of angst in music, you know? Nirvana, during that era, there was a lot of like, I'm pissed off, and then, you know, Ronald Reagan or whoever was the right-wing president at the time. Alice Donut shows were fun, man. They were happy. The colors were neon on Tom's robe. The album covers were bizarre. Chet was this beautiful man-woman mascot. It was happy, it was love. Maybe they were too fun and cool and happy and smiley face for that time.
We were just talking about Nirvana and the grunge thing. You know, for the students I'm teaching right now, there's never been a point when they've been alive that hasn't been on the radio. At the time, you know, we had certain frames of references for that music, but undeniably, it was pretty cool that suddenly on mainstream radio, stuff like that was on the radio and people were listening to it. Even if just from the perspective that they weren't just singing about happy flowers and shit, you know, I mean, that they were like, there was something dark about Nirvana and Pearl Jam and all of these other grunge bands.
Alice Donut was, you know, they're their own trip. I never associated them with that either. That was so like, the alternative thing was just like hard rock. I never felt any part of it though. It's like comparing the Meat Puppets to Aerosmith or something, you know, which, I mean, we're all rock bands. And at the end of the day, we're all rock bands. You're splitting hairs. drums, bass, guitar, idiot.
Alternative meant alternative to commercial, to what the major labels were doing, to what the media wanted to cover, to what your parents wanted you to listen to. Now it's a genre of music that is just another type of commercial music.
Whether it's indie or not mattered so much, and defining whether it was indie or not mattered so much at the time to us. And the degree of, backlash against bands that somehow broke out of that, and the sense of betrayal that was built in.
And I remember all these punks that used to love Green Day, and as soon as they had a hit song, they all turned on it. It was like, oh, you sold out. Oh, that sucks. You weren't allowed to be popular.
Maybe the face of mainstream radio there changes enough that it's just enough to get something going in people's minds, so that there's this generation growing up that they're aware of a darker side, or aware of something that isn't just pure mainstream pap.
Do you think cynicism is insane?
No, I think insanity is cynical more than cynicism is insane. What do you have to say about that?
I would agree. I think cynicism is maybe a little more twisted than insanity, but in a country like this, insanity would have to be more cynical.
Right. In a country like the United States.
In the United States, no. Insanity is a little more bourgeois, I would say.
Yeah, in a place like New York, insanity is not cynical at all. It's like a defense mechanism. So it's a defense mechanism in order to get from one place to the next without being bothered,
Insanity is more of a fashion in New York. In the 1980s, cynicism was in fashion. Everybody wore black and was very cynical. Now in the 90s, everybody wears a lot of wild colors and they're insane. It's just another fashion.
Probably a year went by before Tom actually called me. He asked if I wanted to start working on some music, just he and I together. I said, yeah. So we started working in my apartment. And at the same time, Tom was still working with Donut. And they were just about to go into the studio. So Tom said, well, why don't you come in? We can use some of these songs that you and I have written together and do them for the record. So I said, yeah, sure. So I did the EP, Nadine, with the band, and then kind of came fully on again in Pure Acid Park.
Well, Pure Acid Park really is sort of their kind of apex. It's not really like we wanted to make a produced record, but it was sort of like the studio as I don't even want to say studio as an instrument, because that's such a cliche, but it's as an extension of instruments and creativity and just sort of making it sound a certain way.
This is post-Nirvana, and then you have bands like Creed and Bush and all these guitar, kind of watered-down Seattle sound bands happening. We wanted to do something that wasn't that, as far away from that as possible.
We wanted to just experiment a little more with different instrumentations and bring in weird sounds like non-standard rock sounds.
The one thing we were very clear about is, we said be prepared to not be on every song.
There was some banjo on that album.
We had didgeridoo, we had this little keyboard that Tom was playing Papa Jimmy Munchkin on,
Just weird little, I don't even know what what the instrument is called, but it was the weird little box with buttons on it. Was on that album, and
anybody had any idea, do it. It was like in Big Cars and Blowjobs, like, let's have 5 people playing kazoo at the end. We're like, all right, so go get a box of kazoos, and we had everybody, doing kazoos, and it made it onto the track.
So it was like a reaction to what we definitely were hating on mainstream radio. We're also a bit disillusioned with the whole scene maybe at that time, so it was like, well, if you want this really hard stuff, we're gonna sing really melodic, wussy stuff on a Casio to boot,
Tiny freaks, tiny freaks in love.
The melodies were amazing, the instrumentation was really great,
it just sounded so different than things that I had been hearing from other bands at the time. And I liked the fact that I couldn't tell, was the use of a kazoo on a song, was that a joke? Was that some sort of, pre-millennium, post-irony, whatever sort of tag music writers were giving it at the time? I couldn't tell, and I liked it.
Jurassic Park, I think, was received mixed. I think some people really liked it, and some people probably hated it.
It got slaughtered. What was absurd about that album, review-wise, is the motivation. They were like, oh, they come up with Pure Acid Park in order to get famous.
It's not like we were like, oh no, if we don't sell like 3 million of this one, they're gonna drop us. I mean, it was like always, we're just doing it for ourselves. We've always just done what we wanted to. And so what we wanted to do with Pure Acid Park was just do us different.
If you listen to the album, it doesn't, have like cash written all over it. Unfortunately, it didn't have like that cash appeal.
I had sort of been doing some inventory of my life, and it was a very hard decision because, it was like, that was my life. I love all those people so much, everyone in the band. I think, I was in my late 20s and I was a bit burnt out. I just felt very uprooted, and I wanted to kind of just sit down somewhere and maybe try something new or something, and somehow arrived at that decision to leave. It was a very difficult decision.
So we're back to the kind of the five of us again. In the interim, the period that I had been out of the band, which was, about 2.5 years, I think, they were touring all of the time. So when I'd left, the crowds were at this level. Then when I came back, they were like, suddenly, playing in front of 5,000 people.
Actually, we were like making probably we were making the most amount of money than we ever did, and we were the shows were good.
Yeah, we had a great time on the tour, but it was exhausting. We'd been in a van together for 140 days or something.
It's very risky because a lot of times the customs people would just confiscate all your merch. Then that's it. You've laid out like $5,000 for t-shirts, stickers, and stuff, and it's gone. We kind of broke even on that tour, but broke even when we were used to getting like $1,000 a piece, and when we came home.
It was like a difficult tour, as most tours have, like difficult times. And at the end of it, we were feeling like, well, mostly Tom, of course, was feeling like, this is too much work, we're not making any money, we're not selling records.
Tom quit the band quite a bit.
You probably heard that I quit often.
Not after all of the tours, but in the middle of some tours. He was like, we would have to take him to the airport sometimes in the middle of some tours after like some, heavy night of like gigging, partying, arguing, airport. And they find out, oh, it's gonna be $1 million to fly me back to New York. Fuck it, I'll just do the next gig, and then we're back in.
Everyone quit the band all the time. On tour, you're locked in the van with everybody, you're tired, you're away from home, you're on these long drives. Yeah, we would fight all the time.
But at that point, I was just so sick of it myself. I was just tired, I think everybody was, of really living out of the suitcase.
We were burnt. We'd just come off of a 3 or 4 month tour of just, solid dates all the way through.
We're on a high note now, even though it was a difficult tour, but let's just leave it on a high note and stop.
I just remember Tom calling me and saying, you know what, I'm not gonna do this anymore. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, I'm just tired of this.
Sometimes the band broke up, but we were like, it's not broken up. But this time we were also like beat, and like everybody had to come home and get right to work and like try to survive and make money. That it just, that one took.
Yeah, Greg Werckman gave me the news that the band had broken up, and I was sad but accepting because they'd been around a long time, and bands don't always last forever. I didn't realize quite what a gaping hole it would leave in our label and the kind of the camaraderie of the bands that was stitched together with Alice Donut and No Means No and Victim's Family and Ultra Bidet.
We got to a certain level of achievement, and it was definitely like really gratifying to know that you had these people literally all over the world. Japan. If there are places we hadn't gone, we could have gone there because we got postcards and and letters from people literally in like all over the world.
They broke up before they sucked, and that's a good thing. Some bands stay together way too long.
There was a point where you've kind of hit a wall. You've done all this creative stuff. You've done how many records was it at that time? 7, 8. 7 records, you know, an EP, countless singles, videos, this and that, and you've done all this creative stuff and you just never got beyond a certain level.
I know they wish they were able to reach more people and sell more records, but I know they also don't have regrets because they did everything the right way.
How did Sissy and I get together?
Tom and me started going out at about the last year before that breakup.
You know, we're friends. We've been in the same band forever.
We were like brother and sister almost. He was the best man at my first wedding. And, you know, I knew his ex-wife.
We had both been married to other people, and then we were newly single, so we started going out.
So I really never thought that we would end up together. But they also always put us in one room when we started having the hotels because we were the 2 smokers.
Well, the only thing I know is I remember Tom, before all that, I remember Tom telling everyone when they hired Sissy that no one was ever, you know, no one should ever do anything with her, you know, and that, no, she's a girl and she's cool and just, you know, keep it all professional. So it's kind of funny to find out, like they hid it for a while, that those 2 ended up being a couple.
You know, we never like hug and kiss or like whatever, make out in front of the band members. We ended up telling Steve, and Steve's reaction was just like, that's gross. That's incest.
I don't think either of us thought that we would last, but we fit, so here we are. Now we have 2 kids.
Hey, do you want to hear some more Alice Donut? Do you want to fucking hear some more Alice Donut? You better show them that you want to hear some music, because they can't hear you motherfuckers.
I can't not be in a band.
In 1999, Steve and Michael were like, why don't we like, you know, play together again?
And so the 3 of us got together and just started jamming, just writing, and just to play and hang out because we enjoy hanging out together.
So we were looking around for singers.
Tom at this point was not really interested in getting back into it.
So then finally we found somebody and he got convicted into a mental institution the week after we hired him. So that didn't work out. So finally then we decided, okay, we're just gonna be instrumental.
We came up with, recorded a bunch of ideas, and then Tom was still not interested in playing.
But at the same time I was living with Tom, so he would always hear what Steve and Michael and me were playing because I'd come home and practice it and listen to it.
Eventually Tom decided he wanted to come back, and he liked what he was hearing, and he missed it, so I guess he came back.
So around 2000, we started playing together. And we were thinking, okay, we're going to put out an album and go tour. But 9/11 happened, and then we had a baby, and so everything kind of the timing got a little bit messed up. But that's how we got back together.
With the exception of the people I can see clearly in the light, this is a very attractive audience. In a disturbing way.
Whatever it was that made them such a great band, obviously that was something that, that didn't just go away when the band split up. So it didn't really surprise me when they got back together. It seems like, maybe once they'd had a chance to kind of take a step back and maybe start missing it a little, that suddenly would become more valuable.
Because I knew they enjoyed being with each other and creating with each other so much, I wasn't that surprised. I was happy, and when I went to the show, I saw a lot of faces I hadn't seen in years in the crowd, and it was cool. It was like all people my age or older, and everybody was there. They knew the words to 3/4 of the songs. It was like this thing, and everyone was looking around, and it was like really, it was emotional.
Sunday is coming between
I was actually a little miffed that they had been kind of going on and now playing again as Alice Stonett, and nobody had called me to ask me if I wanted to be in the band. I was pissed off. It wasn't intentional on anybody's part, it just never struck them that I would even be interested.
So the first album was actually the four of us, and we recorded it in Michael's basement.
So by the time Three Sisters was going, I'd been in my new job already for a while, and I had started a record label with a friend of mine. Well, we had great timing with the label because we started the label like, you know, right after the entire music market, especially in rock, died. So people weren't buying CDs, people stopped caring about, you know, rock. So we had a label and no bands, and then here's Alice Stonett, and they have a record and no label.
Did you miss me? Did you miss me? Did you miss me? Did you miss me? I think you missed me. I think you missed me. I haven't thought of you at all.
I guess they had the reunion show in 2003 at CBGB's, and so they said, well, why don't you come on, you know, for the encore and play, you know, just 3 or 4 songs with us at the end. And so I said, yeah, it'll be fun.
Dave is here.
They had a few other shows. They did South by Southwest, but they came down like on my label, and I came on then for, you know, the last third of the set. Then there was another show, and I was on for like half the set, and then we talked about touring Europe, and then I was like, suddenly I'm back in the band again. So we went to the fan forum and said, hey, why don't all of you, you know, if you feel like it, make a video for any one of the songs you like on Three Sisters. Then we'll take all the video submissions, pick the best one, and we'll put that on the re-release of Three Sisters as an enhanced CD. So a few weeks after the contest had ended, we got a video submission from P. Earwig, an animated video for the song Cost, and it blew our minds. It was so amazing.
But he missed the deadline.
But he missed the deadline, so we couldn't get it on the release of the CD.
I had a whole list of like, you know, of places like, you know, that we've toured at and go, well, I could move to Chapel Hill, I could move to Iowa City, I could move to Lawrence, Kansas. But it was kind of mythical, right? We're New Yorkers, you know, I was there 26 years, Sissy was there for whatever, 20 years.
When I first moved there was a lot of music going on. There was all these recording places. Everybody was doing stuff.
What happened is like the place was messy, but people in the neighborhood created these like gorgeous spaces out of that.
There was a lot of Wall Street guys. All the musicians had moved out. The rents went sky high.
We end up moving to a place that's a 5th floor walk up, and we're pregnant with Oscar, so we have to move.
We had a 5-flight walk up, you know, no laundry, which is really impossible with kids.
And then all of a sudden, I got this job opportunity here, and we're like, okay, Let's do it.
And some of our friends I called up after, and I was like, we just moved to Durham, North Carolina. We're not in New York anymore.
So how do you feel coming back and looking at it now?
It's like Disney World. It's totally cleaned up and nice, you know? It's like everybody grew up and got strollers. It's like, like us.
For Fuzz, most of it was written in New York. We went back up and recorded with BC. You know, got all our parts and we came up for one of the mixings, and they did mixing and would send us and we'd listen to it and then we'd tweak it.
The process on Fuzz was awkward. There's also a new way of working, I think a new way for a lot of people to work, where because of the internet really, things are done in different places, in different locations. A lot less is done face to face. It takes time. Luckily, they had time to really burn through it. And I kind of knew that that would happen. As long as they had time, the weird process might actually be an opportunity. And it also lends itself to them because it's not a Band-Aid. It's not an excuse to rely on weirdness with them. You know, with a lot of bands, you're like, oh, I'll do something weird here. And it's like, okay, maybe it's an excuse, wink, wink. I think with them, that's kind of their forte.
I called up P and asked him if he would do another animated video in time to release with Fuzz. He picked, for whatever reason, the longest goddamn song on the record, so it took him about a year to make the video. No, I think the direction we've gone in is to let P just do animations, because then we don't have to do anything, which is much more time intensive and difficult to do, but again, not by us.
And we did one gig to support Fuzz at the Knitting Factory. At this point, it's like everybody's got, like, Tom and Sissy have 2 kids, Michael has 2 kids, can't tour with kids. It wasn't the kind of thing ever where we could be like in a tour bus and have like a nanny and homeschooling or whatever the hell people do that have money. So yeah, so we just didn't tour. Fuzz, 1 gig, and start writing the next record.
20 years! We appreciate the fuck out of it. Thank you very much.
It's difficult now with Tom and Sissy living down in North Carolina. Recording this newest record was like a lot of just emailing files back and forth.
No, we were like, how are we going to keep the band together? We wanted to, everybody wanted to, but we were like, how are we going to do it? So we're like, well, I guess we can send files over the internet and work that way.
So Michael and Steven and I get together once or twice a week and just start working out ideas, and then we'll send those down to those guys. They'll do the same thing. They'll send ideas up to us.
It wasn't until recently that we were all in the same room playing the songs for the last album.
Michael and Steven and I still try to do the drums and guitars live whenever we can to keep that feeling going.
The thing is, we've played together so much. I mean, we've done, I don't know, we lost count, like 1,500 gigs together or something like that. And we've, you know, this is our 10th album. We all know how we work together. We know how we play together. So just because of all the experience we have recording together, it was pretty easy to just like, you know, to record this way.
Perfect. I didn't get it right on the record either. Why should I get it right now?
This is the story of an American.
That was a pleasant surprise when they wanted to come back. Granted, it's a much quieter, somber donut these days, and they aren't road warriors because they got families and things.
I would love to tour, but you know, the rest of them all kind of grew up.
I'm kind of glad to be able to see him again. It's been way too long.
We're going to do the New York show, the California show, and then back to our day jobs and babysitters and start writing the next record.
Mostly for work. I work from home because I try to stay with the kids. I code web pages for money.
I've always done graphic design, so still do that.
I work in a wine shop.
I'm just doing like internet stuff.
I work as a consultant in Kazakhstan.
23 years. 23 years and 10 albums. We're just about to explode. I think that's obvious.
We have exactly that kind of red on one of our walls.
Your hair pretty much is that red too.
It's just amazing that that they've been able to create this bond with these fans, especially in Europe, where they could tomorrow, if they wanted to, say we want to go tour Europe, and that fans on that message board would book the tour for them. They wouldn't have to lift a finger.
I don't have kids yet, so when I think about like, well, what do I leave like when I die? I think, well, I'm very proud of this body of work that we have behind us. I like making the music that we like because I like to listen to it. I don't understand when people say, yeah, I recorded that and I put it out there and I never listened to it again. It's like, well, why the fuck do you do it? If you don't like it, you want me to like it?
And now it's more like art. It's back to its old thing where it's like art for art's sake and less of any other agenda because they have other things in their lives.
I'm on the dad farm. I'm on full on. And they don't really know about Alice Donut, I want them to be, both just, let them be in their cool little magical world, and, when they're in their 30s, they can hear Mule and stuff.
All of a sudden it's, seeing an Alice Donut show, it's a destination. Rather than just something that, something like, oh yeah, it's Thursday and they're at CBGB. Not that that wasn't great too, because it was.
Being with Alice Donut has made me feel like I belong to a really, really cool club with really cool people that all care each other, and we're like kind of outlaws in that we don't play pop music.
I feel like everyone in Alice Donut is like my army buddies or something.
That's why we're still able to do this after 23 years, because we've all seen each other at our very worst. And you see somebody like at their worst and come out of it again, and you learn to be very tolerant. And you think, oh my God, these people are still friends with me after I was such a douchebag to them on this tour, or yesterday, or 5 minutes ago.
We're like a functional family. We love each other. We like being together. We like making music together.
Steve's the godfather of my daughter. He spends holidays with us, they come visit us.
They are as close to me as family. I spend a lot more time with Michael and Steven than I do with most other people in my life, except for my wife.
Yeah, I do. I love him. I'm a donut.
Alice Donut, we have to say goodbye. I don't want to say goodbye. I know. I had a good time. Thanks for coming in.
Yes, thank you.
And it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop. Alice Donut with us for the guest DJ, and we love them here at QSF.
Tom and Sissy just told me their kids are thinking of starting a band called the Stinkies. So maybe someday the Stinkies will be huge, and people will find out that their parents were in this really cool, twisted band. Who knows? I think about that too. I think about the relevancy, 20 years down the line. Will someone stumble across, Untidy Suicides? I guess not on vinyl. I'm sitting here acting like I'm holding a record, a CD, or will someone get an MP3 of the song Egg and be like, whoa, that's catchy as crap, man. That's cool. Who are these guys?